Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and all that ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning in to the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. I'm really pleased. My guest today is Vik Krishnan, who's the general manager at Intrado Digital Workflows. They are very deeply involved in the healthcare provider to patient communications domain. So, Vik, welcome to the Tate Chronicles.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Vik, I'm looking forward to hearing your insights as to the current state of how health systems, providers, other providers have been adopting patient engagement platforms. We've seen a lot of, work in this area over the last 5 years. Maybe the first things were the birth of patient portals that people are using more and more. But there are many other forms of these communications that providers do with as they interact with patients. So let's talk about that a little bit. How have you seen things change over time?
Yeah, I think if you think about where most healthcare providers are today, hospitals and health systems, they're at a place where I would call it stage A. Most of what they're doing, and actually our results from our CHIME survey kind of bear this out, most of what they're doing is still basic one-way notifications around appointment reminders. And things have been that way for a while, because I think the things that actually enable doing more than that have actually been in the works for the last 5 or 7 years. So that glue and that connective tissue to do more, which now health systems are starting to be ready to do, took some time. It took time to get the appropriate information into their EHR systems. It took time to stand up digital teams, patient access teams, to be ready to own these types of transformation that we're starting to see happen now. But I think the trend has still been to date that most hospitals and health systems really are still doing simple one-way notifications, and now we're starting to see that change.
Well, one thing that's kind of fascinating by that is you talk about the providers reaching a stage where they're able to utilize these technologies. We also kind of had to wait till the consumers or the patients themselves are ready to communicate in this manner. So there was a learning curve there on both sides.
Yeah, look, that's absolutely right. If we actually just take a step back, we, Intrado, have been in the patient engagement business for 30 years. We were in this business before SMS existed. We were in this business before the internet was widely adopted. So our business model has been to listen to our customers, to observe what patients are ready for, and evolve over time from, in the 90s, phone calls to emails to basic SMS, and then now advanced two-way digital workflow solutions, which is what we're starting to adopt. And yes, patients have been ready for this probably for a few more years longer than healthcare providers have been ready to actually drive these solutions, but they're ready, and actually we're doing this with a big part of the market today.
Vik, at Intrado, who are your customers? Are they provider organizations? Who are they, and what do you do for them?
Yeah, so excellent question, Jim. So we serve over 10,000 healthcare institutions. So those span the largest health systems in the country, hospitals, getting down to regional hospitals, group practices, and ultimately, on the other end of the spectrum, smaller clinics. But over 10,000 customers that are actually institutions. And what we offer them are patient engagement solutions. So our leading edge solution, which we launched in 2020, is House Calls Pro. So it has advanced two-way SMS and IVR engagement features, right? So it goes far beyond delivering communications and notifications. What it actually does is read information directly from the EHR, have intelligence to actually understand what workflow, what communication to send to a patient at what time. So right message, right person, right time. And then actually collect a response or solve a task for the patient or give the patient options that they actually need to be given, and then ultimately drive solutions and task and workflow completion back to the provider, back into the EHR, so that patients don't have to make phone calls, that front office staff doesn't actually have to chase patients to get things done. Now, I do want to be clear that we've been in this business for decades, as I mentioned. So we're actually driving in the market the adoption of House Calls Pro, where our previous version of our solution, House Calls, was more around basic notifications. So this is what we do today, and a big part of what we're doing today is driving the transformation to House Calls Pro and to some of the more advanced workflows I've talked about, Jim.
One thing I'm really interested to hear from you, Vik, is I'm aware Intrado recently conducted a survey of members of the College of Healthcare Information Management Executives, better known as CHIME, to us about patient engagement. And so this obviously was an opportunity to get information about concerns and trends and things like that directly from the people that are involved in delivering this. So let's talk a little bit about this survey and some of the information that you got back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the survey, where was the interest in communication technologies? What are people?
Yeah, happy to answer that. And this is exactly the kind of thing sponsoring the CHIME survey we've always done to just stay ahead of the curve and meet the needs of the market. So there are really two things, Jim, that popped out from the CHIME survey. So one powerful data point, 91% of respondents in the CHIME survey reported that they intended to improve the patient experience and that they intended to make it easier to seek important routine care for their patients through their emerging patient engagement strategies. 91% wanted to do that, deliver that to their patients. And 51%, they were asked to rank their top three priorities. Within the top three, 51% said it was among their top three priorities to make it easy and seamless to communicate via SMS for patient engagement. So the strong interest was really around improving the experience, making it easier for patients to do things, and particularly to drive two-way SMS engagement with patients, between patients and, of course, their own systems and staff.
Well, let me ask you about that. So SMS, you're talking about text, correct?
That's correct.
And so what types of communication would go across? Would this be scheduled information, insurance information? What kind of information?
Yeah, actually, we talk about it more like workflows. So here are the type of workflows we're seeing patients, or rather providers, want to be able to drive. So some of it is more than just notifying a patient about an upcoming appointment, but actually through SMS or IVR, allowing patients to actually self-schedule or even reschedule their appointments without needing to call the contact center or call the staff. Some of what providers want to do is to drive automated recall campaigns, right? So instead of a patient needing to remember that they may be due for an annual wellness visit or another important procedure like a colonoscopy, but this information exists in the EHR. The provider should automatically just send an SMS and say, you are due for this scheduled procedure. Would you like to schedule it? And just do it through SMS. Automating referral scheduling, right? Referrals are a huge pain point for hospitals and health systems.
Sure.
Automating pre and post procedure communications, ongoing monitoring, vaccine management. That last piece isn't going away anytime soon. So it's really solving these workflows, not just delivering information, but giving the patient the ability to do something and then getting that task solved, putting that information back into the health system EHR.
Vik, let's turn the clock back about 3 or 4 years. The first time that I, on the consumer or patient side, became aware of this is maybe I would schedule an appointment either by calling in or by logging into a provider's website. And then I would get a notification maybe a day or two before the actual visit reminding me of it. And then it seemed like it evolved a little bit to where what was really required was a response from me confirming that I'd received that message and I was coming. So it seemed like there was an evolutionary, process involved in how these technologies are being used, and they're kind of being fine-tuned moving forward.
Yeah, and I would still call that experience, what I would call a stage A. So most providers out there, and I'm talking about solution providers, not healthcare providers. Most other solutions out there, yes, they do what you just said. They say, "Can you confirm your appointment?"
Right.
And then you can put one, and they say, "Thank you," right? Or you can put two and say, "I don't confirm. I'm not going to come." And usually, what you're going to get back if you put that, and you're not using a solution like ours, House Calls Pro, is you're going to get, "We're sorry to hear that. You should call this number, to reschedule," right? So a task that could have been solved digitally, now you're being asked to, as the patient, to do something manually, right? To go pick up the phone, call somebody, wait on hold. And those are the types of things that House Calls Pro, our solution, doesn't ask patients to do. You don't need to do that. There's other ways to solve those types of things.
That's one of the things. I worked at a clinical practice years ago, and the day before patients were scheduled to come in, somebody got the charts or printed out a form and called every one of those patients to remind them. And so I don't know what the percentage is, but a certain number of patients forgot about it or are not going to show up. And if you become aware of that, then those open slots can be filled. So I guess it's also a good way to keep the provider's schedule tightened and full.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I actually would love to talk a bit more about what we found in the CHIME survey related to, that point, Jim. So we talked about the goals in the CHIME survey. 91% want to drive more interactive, SMS patient engagement. 51%, that's a top priority. But here's some other things, Jim, that we found in the CHIME survey. 83% of respondents, again, these are healthcare decision makers at large hospitals and health systems, reported that at least what they did is they did offer basic one-way appointment reminder notifications, like you described. A reminder, one to confirm, two to cancel, not giving options if you do cancel. But less than 1/3 reported that they offered much beyond that, much of anything beyond that, like giving the patient today even a bare minimum of ability to schedule or reschedule. And the definition in the CHIME survey of how we kind of explain that is pretty generous. So I would say it's far less than 1/3 that do any more than what you just described, right? So there's a huge gulf between the aspiration of where health systems want to be and what they're actually doing today. I think that's a key issue that we're actually facing in the market. And it's actually a change that we're actually driving in the market as well. But let's kind of go to that point you mentioned about, okay, there are open slots. How can you actually use them?
Right.
Well, I love talking about the goals, right? What are the goals of digital, communications that our respondents in the CHIME survey told us matter to them? So 68%, Jim, reported that they want to increase patient visit volumes. And 49% reported that they want to reduce call center and front office staff workload and burden, right? So what does House Calls Pro do to actually do that? Our solution, right? So we actually give patients 3 options. We tell the patient, do you want to confirm? Do you want to cancel? Or do you want to reschedule? Patient can say, I would like to reschedule. And then what we do through SMS is we read other open slots that would be suitable for that provider and that patient. And we just give it to the patient in SMS and say, pick one of these times. Actually even ask them, what day do you want to come in? We solve this whole workflow through SMS. And then ultimately, when they do reconfirm another time, we record that appointment, pass that back into the EHR. And what's happened here? That space, that slot was not lost, or rather that patient was not lost. That patient will still come in at another time. And now the provider actually knows that slot is free because that's been rescheduled. We can drive another action like a recall or a referral and fill that slot with another patient, right? So what we've done here is ultimately increase patient volumes through our platform, and we've decreased the manual element that goes into it, which is quite burdensome for hospitals and health systems.
Based on this survey, was there interest in online chat or, the kind of automated chat bots that that provide information, kind of like it's like frequently asked questions already because there's not a live person on the other side, but sometimes there could be a live. Any interest in that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I was actually far lower. It was interesting. So I talked about, some of the top goals reported in CHIME. Only 34% of respondents in the CHIME survey indicated that the top 3 priority was to leverage more chatbot-based technologies in the near term. And, I actually think that's partly a reflection of, some of the barriers that hospitals and health systems are actually facing in driving this transformation. I'll give you, an example of that.
Okay.
Of course, I talk to these providers all the time. So a huge barrier is that decision makers at hospitals and health systems find this all very daunting, right? Like, Jim, you've been to a lot of these trade shows, and you're aware of all the solution vendors out there that, basically are digital patient engagement, some form or another solutions. There's a lot of them out there. Look at the number of companies you see at a trade show. And some of them are pretty far out there in terms of what they can offer. And I'm not saying those are not, necessarily powerful solutions that could help in some form, but they are so distant from where health systems are today. Just going back to the CHIME survey,
sure.
Most providers are in stage A, right? All they do today is offer basic one-way notifications. So the way we think about the market is there's kind of, 4 stages you can think about. Most are in stage A today. You're doing basic one-way SMS. Stage B, I would argue, is true two-way SMS and IVR. So instead of delivering just notifications and communications, actually allowing for tasks and workflows to be solved through those modalities, SMS and IVR, and two-way interactions. Stage C might be going beyond SMS and IVR, things that are conversational, engage in different ways, maybe like a chatbot, Jim. And then stage D, you see a lot of these at the trade shows. This is like AI, right? Like doing something way out there that, is probably a reach for where a lot of health systems are today. But the key trend is that health systems are moving from stage A to stage B, getting to real two-way SMS and IVR workflow and task solutions. That's a low-hanging fruit and a ton of ROI to get for them to move there. So I think that's a reflection of why something like a chatbot wasn't quite in the top 3 today. That might change a little later on.
Okay. One pain point for any provider is, and for a patient also, if I go in and see my general practitioner or whoever I go see, and they want to refer me to a specialist or to some other provider, quite frequently they fax a referral request to the other entity, who then I hope is going to call me as the patient. So it's a kind of a low-tech, complex, doesn't work too well, this whole issue around referral management. Is there any way we're going to see efficiencies brought to referral management? Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned that. So referral management is something we've solved through our House Calls Pro platform, but you're absolutely right. That's still the standard of how this is done. Something is faxed, and then either you have to take the initiative as the patient to get that scheduled, or you're going to be chased by front office staff through phone calls at the provider that wants you to schedule that referral. It's probably going to go to your voicemail, Jim. They're probably going to make 3 attempts and never reach you. And this is a huge problem. So we have an automated referral module that's part of House Calls Pro. We know when a referral has been made. We automatically reach out to the patient and give them options to schedule that referral. We do that through SMS. Some referrals, Jim, do require a conversation between the patient and the provider. It's not, simple to schedule a referred procedure, via SMS if it's an advanced complex procedure. It may require a little bit of intake. But even so, we have capabilities through features we call dynamic throttling and live connect to actually find the most optimal time to connect that patient by phone quickly with somebody to speak to at the provider. But we ultimately have a closed loop solution for that workflow. One of our customers, Jim, Freighter Health, started using our referral workflow last year, and they've had tremendous success with it. They reported that the sheer burden that they were facing from a staff perspective really went away through this type of automation, right? They don't need to chase patients anymore. They don't need to make those calls, track this, and they can actually divert their staff to other purposes, and that's made their experience a lot easier. And we see a lot of our customer base now adopting our referral workflow.
That is a real kind of behind the scenes back office, frequently nightmare, where care delivery and care referral, probably a pretty high, I won't say failure rate, but there's a lot of static in that chain of communication right now. Well, I know, Vik, that there's some very large healthcare-related conferences coming up in March. First of all, there's the upcoming VIVE, V-I-V-E conference. That's going to be, I believe, March 6th through 9th in Miami Beach. And this conference merges the leadership of CHIME and the digital marketplace of health, HLTH, really focus on the business of transformation in healthcare. Secondly, a couple of weeks later, or less than a couple of weeks later, is the HIMSS Global Health Conference, also in Florida, but it's in Orlando, March 14th and 18th. So I would kind of expect that Intrado is going to be there in some shape or form.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to be there. We're going to have booths at both of them. I'm personally going to be at both. I'm very excited. And, I'm excited to meet everybody involved in the healthcare ecosystem, decision makers, other people in the technology space. So I definitely love going to these. And we're going to have a big presence at both of those, both VIVE and HIMSS in March.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. And at least one of them, I'll track you down. Before we totally run out of time, let me kind of ask you to look in the crystal ball and tell us where you hope we're going to be in 3 to 5 years in terms of.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So I think we would have driven a significant portion of the healthcare provider market through that transformation from stage A to stage B at that point. Right. So you're going to see a huge portion of the country offering, advanced two-way SMS and IVR engagement workflows. And I think we're going to see a significant pivot away from basic SMS reminders and, that wasn't the response I expected, so-and-so patient. So, now you have to call this phone number, right? So I think you'll see that change through the transformation we're driving. But you will see us driving the transformation to stage C at that point. So there'll be more conversational solutions that we're solving. We will have certainly transitioned. We're already doing this beyond specific workflows that are right patient, right message, right time, right task, to ongoing monitoring as well, which we can also drive through our platform. So what we'll be doing is driving this, from stage B to C, and we'll be driving this more toward monitoring and even care management. I don't want to say specifically like anything related to the visit, but
Sure.
Ongoing care management, right? Like that's where we'll be evolving the market, and we're going to make this seamless and easy both for healthcare providers and for patients.
One thing that I certainly hope drops away in terms of technology is when whether a patient is calling a provider or their insurance company, they just get an automatic answering machine that says punch 1 for this, 2 for this, and 7 for this, and then they do that, and then there's another menu. So the more it can be driven towards, as you mentioned, conversational exchange, the better for everybody.
Yeah, the goal is to minimize the need for a patient to actually have to pick up the phone and call anyone. The goal is to minimize the need for a healthcare provider to have to go chase patients, right? So, absolutely.
Yeah. Vik, it's hard to believe, but we're almost totally out of time here. And but let me ask, where can listeners go if they want to find more information about Intrado and your services?
Yeah, look, a great starting point would be going to www.intrado.com, INTRADO. Another great place to go would be to just look me up on LinkedIn, Vik Krishnan, LinkedIn. You can associate me with Intrado. I post a lot personally about what we're doing. You can also find our overall social presence and postings if you just find me on LinkedIn. But
okay.
sources.
To our listeners, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. I offer a special salute to my guest today, Vik Krishnan of Intrado. Vik, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you, Jim. It was a pleasure.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.